11th Rutherford County School Board work session to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Sheila Bratton. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Any questions on the approval of the agenda? Does any board member have a question about the agenda? How about the consent agenda? Are there any questions this evening on the consent agenda? Okay. Visitors, we're going to do on Thursday, right, Mr. Spurlump? Correct. And number 7, Spotlight on Education, we'll do on Thursday as well. Mm-hmm. So get right to number 8.
All right, number 8, Mr. Evans, if you want to go over the data.
I will talk you through that one. Mr. Lee just pointed that out to me. I missed it when I was copying it, so my apologies. John, can you bring that up for us, please? Okay, so Mr. Spurlock asked me to pull together the data from 9/13 through the Friday before fall break, which was October 1st, just to give us some comparison data. This is basically the first 3 weeks of the mask requirement that the board approved. The first sheet that you're looking at are the student positives reported. During that time, you can kind of see the trend there. You're also going to see in a minute the trend for the community positive rate. Any questions on student positives? It breaks it down for you day by day. And just so you know, the Mondays tend to be a little higher on students because anything that was reported over the weekend goes into Monday's numbers. So you're going to see every Monday there's a little bit of an uptick as it's trending down. Next page, John. And then the next page, this is our employee, even though it says student positive, this is our employee positive rate from the same time period. It's broken down by classified and certified, but the gray line is the actual total of all employees that were reported cases of COVID. It goes from the 9/13, there were 9 cases that day, to the Friday before fall break, there were 3 cases, and then there's a variety in between, a couple of spikes here and there. Then the next one, John, please. And then this is the positivity rate for Rutherford County. The state of Tennessee provides a dashboard broken down by county, so every Monday we grab the community spread rate for the county and post that on our dashboard. So I've got listed there the 5 Mondays during this time period, starting with September 13th through today's number. You can basically see that the positivity rate has cut in half over those 4 to 5 weeks there. And then the last slide, which you can't see because it's a duplicate, is our attendance rate. Mr. Spurlock pulled that, the attendance for every day. It also shows that our attendance number has climbed from 89% the September 13th to about 94% as of today. And so that's about normal for us. Mr. Spurlock can speak to that, but about mid-90s is where we usually fall during a normal school day, a normal school year, with the exception of drops because of like flu season, things like that. But we usually kind of float in the mid-90s, somewhere between 94 and 96%. Any questions there? Anything else you want me to cover, Mr. Spurlock?
Is there anything any board member would like to know about? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments that any board member would like to make on item number 8? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 9.
All right, we're first going to look at the Riverdale, Rockville, and we've got option 1 and option 2 on the rezoning. This is a rezoning proposal.
Okay, so we wanted to take a stab at trying to acclimate some of the 8th grade, kind of what we did at Siegel Middle School as we progressed that one grade up and any grades that follow after. So we're trying to formulate that same idea in this first option to relieve some pressure off of Rockvale High School. So at the end of 1 year's progression for 8th grade, what we're trying to do is move a couple of newly built subdivisions that would make up a difference of 2455 for Rockvale High School, which is as of today, and propose to open next year at 2318 after all these 8th graders have been rezoned. And then Riverdale High School, we would actually shift them over to Riverdale so that it would increase them from 1844 to 1981.
Okay, that was with just the freshman class. So what we looked at, and quite frankly, as we look at Rockville's high school freshman class over the last several years, it's been high 500 to up to 600, I think, maybe this year. So the second option is actually taking 9th through 11th, which would be rising sophomores and seniors next year. So you go with that now.
And one thing to remember too, next year for Rockvale, we'll have a full build out. The senior class this year is still a little bit small in comparison to the other three classes. So the second option we're giving you is a little bit more aggressive. We're looking at actually doing what we normally would do, which is a traditional zoning, rezoning. You take all the grade bands that fit within a certain geographic area and you move them all. So if we were to take that stance and do that, that would actually significantly drop Rockvale. But remember, if you take away from one, you've got to add to the other. So you end up with with next year's enrollment somewhere around 2275. For Riverdale.
With the understanding if the board chose to, they would grandfather the senior class at Rockvale.
Absolutely, it's always an option.
Do you have any numbers on that, what that would look like, broken down by, if you know, how many seniors that would be in this? Well, you could probably get it for us, though.
Yes, absolutely, I can get it for you tomorrow morning. Yeah. And do you want me to send that to the entire board or send it to you first?
I think send it to the board.
Okay, great. Any questions on either one of those?
All right, the next rezoning proposal is we look at Blackmon Middle School. We know it's a challenge. Quite frankly, this one's more of a challenge than the one we just looked at. But in trying to do something where we can eliminate, some of that overcrowdedness, I think this year we added, how many, did we add a portable at Blackmon Middle? One portable, is that what we got currently? What's their current enrollment? Is it $15.99?
Right at $15.90. We'll have another staffing report this week.
Gotcha. Okay. Go over that if you would.
Sure. So again, as Mr. Spurlock said, this is quite a bit more aggressive, and it is more of what we see in a traditional rezoning. We've had some capacity given to us at Smyrna Middle School through a build, so we want to take advantage of that space, and in doing so, we kind of shifted some things around. Well,
this is option one, right?
Yes, sir. And that would be for either case, but for option one specifically, I wanted to try to make the zoning lines as clean as possible. We have the opportunity in that area of the county to use major thoroughfares, large bodies of water, things like that, to kind of give clean breaks between the zones. No parent wants to go across the interstate every morning if they can help it. So what we did in that is basically boxed off Rocky Fork Middle School. And we did some give and take in the different areas. And of course, I can go into each one a little bit more detail if you'd like. But what that does is takes Rocky Fork Middle, where we're seeing quite a bit of growth right now, drops them from 758 to 682, allows us to bring up Smyrna Middle School all the way over to Old Nashville Highway, and it increases their number quite a bit, but remember, they've got more room to give now. Stewart's Creek has had some issues with capacity, so we're trying to drop them down. It also cuts them off at I-24 and 840, nice clean break there. And then for Blackmon, which is seeing pretty heavy enrollment right now, it drops them down to 1425. Any questions there?
So could I ask a question, please? And you may not be able to answer this, but it may be Mr. Lee. I know that we're shifting all these down, but the two Arbor Ridges neighborhoods that are coming in right at the line that are above Stewart Creek, last number we were looking at was 2,600 kids. So if we're looking at doing this the next school year, how is that going to play into it? And because that's a lot more kids coming up there in that area.
Sure. That's always, given some reason to pause. But another thing taken into consideration is how long it actually takes to build out a subdivision. Depending on the housing market and depending on how fast that area grows, you see it, I'm sure,
Yeah.
that the growth is coming in that part of the county from Antioch, and quite frankly, they don't have the resources a lot of times to purchase right away. So thinking that's going to be a slower build, and it gives us some time through a shift to be able to decide what to do next.
Okay. Because Mr. Lee, I know the Arbor Ridge that's actually on Waldron Road, but there's another subdivision that plays into that that's on Rock Springs.
That would be Gwynn Farms.
Do we know when that one's, because they've already got a stoplight up there. I just came through there today and I was like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah, I think they're
moving.
proposing to have their first products sometime in the spring.
Right now, either one of these do not really give us a whole lot of wiggle room out for Blackmon Middle, and I think that's probably the school that we need to be addressing. And one of that is, quite frankly, when you look at where the density is in relationship for both Blackmon Middle and Rocky Fork Middle, you're talking about a distance of perhaps close to 6 miles difference?
It was like 8.5.
8.5?
Yeah, from the farthest point to the school, yeah.
So that makes it difficult. It makes it really difficult to move enough, because I guess it's the Old Nashville Highway. That's where we're primarily taking this option one.
That's right. So if you you can kind of see the space when you're looking at the blue area on the map that defines what we're suggesting for Rocky Fork. You see gaps in between each of those subdivisions. Now, when you get down into a place that's closer into town, more like what we're seeing in Blackmon, when they build the next available piece of land. There's a long ways to go to fill in the gaps along Old Nashville Highway. And remember, there are only so many places to get across the interstate. So in saying that, we have to look more at Old Nashville Highway as a thoroughfare and a place of egress for automobiles.
One of the questions, Mr. Lee, I was looking at, we know Stewart's Creek Elementary is pretty much at capacity, but for a long time, Stewart's Creek Middle, we have not seen that substantial amount of growth. And I'm looking at the boundary lines, and I can't figure out what's taking place there.
Well, I think part of it is when Stewart's Creek first opened, it was more of an even demographic, where you had people that were buying homes were, I'm going to say, more middle-aged, and they had children that branched 2 or 3 different zones.
Gotcha.
Now what you're seeing in the Stewart's Creek area is the price point has gone up. So what it's done, it's kind of priced out some of your younger families, and we're seeing that the younger families are waiting somewhat longer to have children when they can afford these homes. I think that's what we're beginning to see now, is that Stewart's Creek Elementary is busting at the seams, and their kindergarten, first grade classes are kind of like what happened to us at Rockville Middle, year before last. They're coming in much larger than what we've seen in the past. So that growth has not been transferring from the elementary to the middle, but over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see that growth, and what's going to compound it is all the new subdivisions that don't show on the map, and we can't count them till they're
Right.
actually homes, but there's 4 subdivisions within 3/4 of a mile of Stewart's Creek Middle, and that's what happened to us at Blackmon. They built out around us. Once we added that annex, that growth caught up to us, and same thing at Blackmon Elementary.
Gotcha.
Another thing, back to your point too, when we're evaluating a subdivision and how fast it grows, we've had a lot of builders come into this room and tell us, we're building 800 homes, but 10 years later, they've only built out 1/4 of what they have available. So as Trey said, we've got to kind of watch them as they build and kind of answer to that building.
There's a number that have built out faster than they thought, and some of it is price point. Right now, in Rutherford County, there's very little inventory. So it doesn't matter where the house comes up. If they're putting them up, they're selling them. And the ones that were able to get their infrastructure in last year are reaping the benefits this year. So like the subdivision that you're talking about there on Waldron Road, they haven't broke ground yet. It's coming. But they're going to be 18 months, my prediction, 12 to 18 months before they've got their roads cut in, before it really impacts us. But what's going to happen is 3 years down the road, they're going to be the one that we're talking about that's impacting us if it continues to go like this. And these subdivisions around Stewart's Creek and around Rockville area, they've already got the infrastructure in, so they're able to build now. And that's why we're seeing I don't want to call it a problem, but that's where we're seeing this exponential growth in certain pockets. Even though we see growth in all around the county, that's what's making it more difficult for Shane and for us to stay out ahead of it, is because we're trying to catch them. The Maples project out on Manchester Highway out past Whitworth Buchanan. 3 years ago, we were talking about it. It was going to really impact us at Whitworth Buchanan, and they're one of those that's probably maybe now they're a half built out. So it's still a guessing game, but the best thing to do is look at the infrastructure. Do they have roads in? Do they have power poles up? And if they do, that's the ones we really need to be looking at impact, because they're ready to put product on the market.
Mr. Lee, what about those apartments that are coming in? It's right beside Pinnacle. I think they call that strip through there Lowry, right by the railroad tracks. I know there's some apartments.
That's supposed to be a 55 and up.
Okay.
I hope. But when they submitted the drawings, the city did ask Jason Everett and I to look at it because they wanted to put a bus stop in it. So my question to the city was, if it's 55 and up, why do I need a bus stop? But we worked with them and put a bus stop in there anyway. So that's one of those, we're trying to keep an eye on it. There's 2 more apartment complexes coming as well. One they're looking at is on Old Nashville Highway next to Smyrna West. And there's another one that I just got word of last week that is by the YMCA there at Montlow, between the YMCA and the Waldron commercial property that's under construction. That's that wooded area. There's about 390-something apartments going in there.
And also the cottages of, is it Central Park that's by the post office?
Yes,
I see they're building more there.
Yes.
And they've got enough road to build out to the road.
so we're
It's like a whack-a-mole.
yeah, whack-a-mole. I mean, that's a good way to look at it. But to answer your question is, we do look at those, but we're saying that's going to be a 2-year, 3-year out the road, but we're doing the best we can at speculation on how fast they can build them.
My concern with Blackmon Middle, we probably rezoned that school as much as any school we've rezoned since I've been on this board. And I'm afraid we're gonna be rezoning it again within just another 2 or 3 years. It just seemed like that area continuously
Yeah,
keeps growing.
absolutely. I'm not real sure that this is really, and you did a great job, because there's not, well, you and I went over this. I don't know if there's a good answer to, really, to be honest with you. I don't know if I would like either one of these, and it's not your fault. I just don't think it doesn't impact them.
Not a
enough.
Band-Aid big enough.
No. Right, absolutely.
We'll say the same thing that you and I keep preaching every time we're on the radio, or if you've got land between Ernest Burgess's in town or along Veterans Parkway in that 96 area, we've reached out. Mr. Young, you and I both have reached out to 2 or 3. I've talked to Mr. Marshall. We've talked to a lot. We've got a lot of feelers out there, and so far for the last 18 months, we're batting over on somebody in that area willing to sell us some property. And if we could, that's really where we need a new middle school, and it would really alleviate something like this, and it would help Rockvale Middle. It's going to help Blackmon Middle. Could help Stewart's Creek a little bit.
Yeah,
But
I think it would be more Stewart's Creek and Blackmon more so
yes,
than
more
Rockville.
so than anything, and that's what we're looking for, and so far, we're batting over.
That's something else that should be said too, is we get asked quite a bit, why are we not forward-thinking enough to know when things are going to happen? Even when we have a beat on something, it doesn't mean that we can buy land. A lot of times they price it just a little bit too high for us to be able to purchase. Or there's not enough of a
It's
good
not
price.
available.
What is the capacity of Rocky Fork Middle School? I think I know, but what's
It's
the,
right at 1,000.
that's what I thought.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions about that particular option?
We'll go back to the drawing board on the other one.
You want to wait?
We'll continue on, but we'll add another map.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Kind of look at it. I think that our biggest concern is Blackmon Middle.
Yes.
And I don't think we're going to find any land anytime soon. So we'll continue to work with that one.
All right. So the last one is option, we have a second option for this. And the biggest thing we wanted to try to do here is keep as much normalcy as we could. Try to keep the zones as close to what they are and still meet our goals. So you can see that there, they tie in pretty closely together. The Rocky Fork Middle School is about 50 more than what we had before. We left a portion that is currently in along Mason Tucker. That portion was left out, but we did take this little dog ear that was down here at the bottom. You'll see it has 137 students in it. We went ahead and removed that and took it up to something that looked a little bit more contiguous with the Smyrna Middle School zone. We also looked at taking that 63 from Blackmon Middle, again, just to give Blackmon a little bit more relief, and pull them over to the Stewart's Creek side, and also hedged it off there at 840.
What we'd like to do on these proposals, and perhaps maybe have some feedback from the board as we go along, but sometime in November, have 2 meetings out in our school. One would be at Rockville High School, which would involve, obviously, the Rockville and Riverdale rezoning, and one at Blackmon Middle School, which would involve Stewart's Creek and Blackmon Middle and Rocky Fork Middle. And perhaps maybe at that time we can keep looking at that one and kind of see where we can kind of bring more away from Blackmon Middle. And then, of course, the final meeting would be here at the district office once the board had voted on what proposal they wanted to do going forward.
Mr. Spurlock, I'm sorry if I may. I know the Blackmon area is a great area. Is there something else that we should be looking at for like the middle school, since there's so many at the middle school? I know that's the stepping stone to go to the Blackmon Collegiate College. Is that something that maybe is making that area so attractive?
I think it's the infrastructure
More so than the-
there. I think that's what the biggest thing that they have going for them is the infrastructure. It's very accessible. You've got the interstate, you've got 840.
All your
you got-
shopping,
You got all the shopping.
restaurants, the bulk of that stuff is right there at Old Fort Parkway.
You can buy you a car, several cars.
Go to dinner, buy a house.
They've
Well,
also
not a house.
they've also dropped 3 or 4 apartment complexes in that
Right.
zone
They have.
in the last 12 months. I mean, it's the newest one right there is at 840 and Veterans Parkway. I mean, they're dropping them in on us. We have a couple of locations, whether it's elementary or middle, where we pull up with a bus that's running, 75, 80 children, and we're picking up 60 kids at one apartment complex. And that bus is running a double route, and they're running and dropping children off and turning around and going right back.
We haven't seen any impact from Shelton Farms yet, have we? But it's coming, though.
They just started getting their product in the last 5 to 6 months really taking off. It's coming.
That's huge.
We went from having, what we looked at today, we went from having somewhere about 35 to 40, if I remember right, in March, and it's grown to 70, and that's just of this demographic, just this grade band.
We ever looked at this, if we got an apartment complex that's got a huge number like 60, maybe just zoning that apartment complex to a school that has more capacity. It would relieve Blackmon and
We've talked about doing things like that in the past. It generally gets brushed off, and the reason is because that apartment complex isn't sitting right on the line. If nobody wants to hear that busing word, so if we have one that's further up into a zone, we have to reach up and grab everything else along with it, and sometimes that doesn't work out too well as far as getting a solid number.
yeah, I know it would create some pocket zoning, so to speak.
And it does cause a lot of tension in the public when you're talking about taking a small group just to get that one large piece.
Any other questions?
I don't envy you, and I appreciate you put so much thought into this.
You did.
I appreciate it, and I've come to you, and I've talked to you in the past, and I appreciate all of this. Sure. Somehow we'll make it work.
Appreciate it, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. Okay. Next item, number 10.
All right, it's the Rethink Forward amended application. Dr. Sullivan?
So I'll try to be as brief as possible. You have a yellow folder, and if you would just open that, I'm going to go over a couple things, and we are not going to go over this in all detail, but I wanted you to at least have access to it. The first page, if you will, just has a review at the top. Looks like there's a little PowerPoint section. I just wanted to kind of give a review again of where we've been. So we received this notice of intent in December 2020. We had our initial application in January. March through April, this board appointed our review committee. We found the application to be incomplete. On May 4th, we received a letter from Commissioner Swin recommending that we review it as complete. In June, we had to ask for a waiver because those timelines had then expired. We received that waiver, and then July 22nd, the RCS board voted to deny that initial application. On August 27th, we received the amended application, and therefore we have 60 days to review and approve or deny. And so that gets us to this October 14th to either approve or deny the amended application. So if you'll go over to the next page, you don't have to read all of this in detail because I have it in two different spots. I just wanted you to know what your options were on Thursday. So on Thursday, the board motion is either to recommend to approve Rethink Charter amended application for Rutherford Collegiate Prep, and you will see the very first bullet right beside it. If approved, we will then enter into agreement with Rethink Forward to operate Rutherford Collegiate Prep. And at that point, we are the authorizer of the charter agreement. The next option, or the other option, is recommend to deny Rethink Forward charter amended application for Rutherford Collegiate Prep. That is a new step, and that as of, if you will flip over to your next document, it is actually Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-108. So it is the next thing in your packet. Just got Tennessee Code Annotated at the top. And if you will flip over to the back of page 2, I've highlighted it for you. And you will see where this applies differently, as in it's section B. This subdivision is repealed at 12:59 on December 31st, 2020. Before December 31st, 2020, this went to the Tennessee State Board of Education. On January 1st, it now goes to the newly created Tennessee Charter School Commission. And so all of those on that back page that I was just referencing in our PowerPoint are what happens during a denial process. Basically, to summarize it, there will be, the applicant has 10 days, I believe, to submit an appeal to the Tennessee Charter School Commission. They will have a meeting potentially in our board, in our LEA, with comments available from the public. And then the Tennessee Charter Commission has 75 days to make a final ruling. A big difference here is if the commission will have two options to either uphold the decision or to approve the charter. If they approve the charter in section D, so it's the very last bullet, the last sentence is the commission's decision is final and is not subject to appeal. If the commission approves an application, then the commission is the authorizer in the LEA. So a huge difference there between who is the authorizer and the LEA responsible for academics, all those type of things. So that's just a little bit of an overview of the first two documents. The next one is a huge document. And so I wanted the board to have this as part of our process. On that July 22nd, we spent quite a bit of time going through each scoring section, highlighting strengths and weaknesses of each one. As part of that, the amended application included some additions, but Rethink Forward also submitted written documentation stating their thoughts on some of those facts that were in our resolution. So the very last column on this whole big document, you'll see the first thing on the left is stated reasons for denial. Then the response from Rethink Forward is that middle. And then our RCS response is the last one. And that is what our charter committee looked at in responding to that. There are a couple just quick points I wanted to highlight. If you'll look down on this, the very first page, and just to give you an example of kind of how this walks, on the RCS response, on the very fifth line, it says all timelines followed as described in law. So again, what we found was Rutherford County Schools found the application to be incomplete as the applicant submitted components required for Category 1, New Start, and not a Category 3 existing. In various places in the application mentioned below, the applicant submitted information specifically mentioning Metro Nashville Public Schools and not Rutherford County Schools. These submissions on the application are a direct result of Rethink Forward replicating the existing charter school for Nashville Collegiate Prep. They're still mentioned in the amended application in the financial section and in letters of support and in an ethics document. And I have all those listed on the next page. Just a couple other things I did want to point out. If you will flip to the seventh page, at the very top it says section 1.2 enrollment summary. It's the seventh page of this enrollment summary. And again, a lot of this is just in minutia and details, but I want you to see what, since you were tasked with approving or denying the links we went to as well, you'll see that the response from the applicant team, the page number reference for this quote is page 13. There is no such quote. It's actually on page 15. And so those are the details that we have gone through and made sure that they were the correct details. However, there were a lot of things that, if you'll flip 2 more pages, that were very much appreciated and amenable to the Charter Review Committee. For example, in the middle of this page, it says Science and Social Studies not mentioned in grades 6 through 8 of the academic plan. You'll see that we have satisfactory response schedules for middle school are included on page 85. Next section about mobile classrooms, satisfactory response because they clearly detailed those. So we have those throughout different areas. Again, I'm not going to read all of these to you. I did want you to try to find one section. It's section 2.1. It's probably 7 or 8 pages from the back. So it says section 2.1 governance, and this is listed in several locations. One of our areas talked about a major concern with appearance of relationships between different organizations. And you'll see the response from the applicant team, and to where we wanted to make sure that it was noted, while it is allowable under Tennessee state laws, they stated, a simple search of these connections will show concerns not shared solely by this review committee. The very last document you have shows one of those type of concerns. And while the Charter Commission, or with our review committee, I apologize, is tasked with reviewing the application, part of the scoring rubric also calls for, as part of the TDOE scoring rubric review process, independent due diligence, as stated as the basis for recommendations. And this is some of our own research in being able to find findings. There were concerns for our constituents and for our students. So, to kind of summarize where we go now, so we will go through a simplified version of the initial scoring application and any amended applications that we need to make a notice to. I know there are several sections that actually will improve their score based on our review committee, where they submitted the required documentation. We'll discuss the financial section, section 3, on Thursday, and then you'll be tasked on Thursday with either having an approval or denial for that process again. So I tried to make that as brief as possible because this is a long process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Moving on, number 11.
All right, number 11, found on tab number 2, CTE Career Cluster. The Curriculum and Instruction CTE Department would like to allocate approximately $15,000 of Perkins 2021-2022 funds to support CTE curriculum team leads for our high school career and technical education career clusters. The purpose of this CTE curriculum team lead would be to help develop instructional capacity of teachers, industry partners, and students within our county. The leads would be responsible for conducting in-person virtual meetings for career cluster PLCs and advisory council meetings. The allocations are each participant receives $500 stipend for conducting professional development sessions and the advisory council meetings through the PLC framework by the CTE career clusters. On the next page, you will find the career cluster, the ambassador proposed, and the position where they work.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, number 12.
Our number 12, Curriculum Instruction, Plainview Elementary, found on tab 3. Plainview Elementary Principal Dr. Mark Gagne has requested to pilot an IET, Accelerating Character Education and Development resources at Plainview Elementary. Curriculum Instruction has reviewed and submitted materials and is supportive of this pilot program. For this participation, NIET will provide Plainview Elementary with a $3,500 stipend.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, number 13.
All right, number 13, found on tab 4. This is the first of 2 readings of these proposed policy recommendations. Number 1, Policy Committee recommended policy changes. Below are the policy changes recommended by the Policy Committee on the first of 2 readings. We got 1A, Policy 1.400, School Board Meetings. It added guidelines for posters and materials from visitors during the school board meetings. 1B, Policy 1.404, Appeals to and appearances before the board. Made changes to visitor process and decorum requirements in line with allowable and unallowable restrictions established by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. 1C, Policy 1.703, School Attendance Zones and Exemptions. It updates the zone exemption policy to reflect the new required state law, Public Chapter 479. 1D, Policy 4.602, Grade Point Average, GPA, and Class Rank. Clarifies ACT tie-breaking mechanism. 1E, Policy 6.200, Attendance. Added clarity to the process for approving excused absences for non-school sponsored extracurricular activities from state board policy. 1F, Policy 6.502, Foreign exchange students. Place control of acceptance or denial of foreign exchange students with principals and remove components no longer applicable. Number 2, the new policies. 2A, Policy 4.204, Summer Instructional Programs. This is required by law, sets out general expectations for summer learning and other learning loss programs mandated by law. 2B, Policy 6.4052, Opioid Antagonists. New state law allows nurses to store Narcan to respond to overdoses.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, moving on.
All right, number 3 is a disciplinary hearing appeal. The board has been requested to review the decision of the DHA to uphold the remandment of a student from Riverdale High School. The student was expelled for 1 calendar year under Board Policy 6.309 for possession of illegal drugs. This is a zero tolerance offense. The director of schools modified the zero tolerance to allow a student to attend alternative school in lieu of the 1-year expulsion. Based on the review of the DHA's record, the board may do the following. A, affirm the decision of the DHA. 2, overturn the decision of the DHA. Or C, grant a hearing before the board.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I'm assuming this is standard to do remand for a year.
Okay, number 14.
All right, number 14, financial matters found on tab 5, Oakland High School Baseball Booster Club Turf Project request. The Oakland High School Baseball Booster Club, Inc. is asking for permission from Rutherford County School Board to install turf on Oakland High School baseball field. This project will be 100% funded by the OHS Baseball Booster Club and an unsecured loan of $250,000 that will be payable by the Booster Club. The attached document detailing the project has been reviewed by the Assistant Superintendent of Budget and Finance for financial compliance, as well as Rutherford County Staff Attorney and Rutherford County Athletic Director for legal Title IX compliance. Contingent on the school board approval, the turf purchase will be made through the Rutherford County Schools Purchasing Department utilizing the Sourcewell Consortium bid. Upon completion of the project, Rutherford County Schools Engineering will inspect the construction to ensure that it complies with the bid specifications. It is stressed that the turf project becomes donated asset from OHS Baseball Booster Club to Rutherford County Schools, and at the time of the donation, there will be no liens on the donated property as attested by the Oakland High School Baseball Booster Club and verified by the Rutherford County School Board Attorney, or the Board Attorney, excuse me. And Mr. Marshall's here tonight to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Next item.
All right, number, I missed one. All right, number 2, Fiscal year 2020-21 Internal School Activity Fund Report and approval of prior year activity fund accounts payable. During the fiscal year of 2020-21, Internal School Activity Fund Report has been issued by the board's contracted CPA audit firm, Matlock and Clement CPAs, for the school board's review and approval. The report contains the detailed year-end balances and financial operations for the last fiscal year for Rutherford County schools that have an internal school activity fund. The audit report contains 4 audit findings. This year, Blackmon High, Laverne Middle, McFadden Elementary, and Siegel High that have been reviewed by the school principals and bookkeepers of these 4 schools. The report contains corrective action plan that was submitted by each of the principals of these 4 schools, detailing how they will correct the audit findings promptly. The audit report also provides audit balances of unliquidated fiscal year 2020-2021 accounts payable by individual schools, which the board votes to approve annually and is required by the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Policy Manual. Is there anything, Mr. Beaudry, that you want to add to that?
Just as is noted, the 4 schools, the principals, of course, submitted a written corrective action plan detailing, how they're going to correct any items that the auditor noted in the time frame that they corrected in, and that's in writing, placed in the audit.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, seeing none, moving on.
All right, number 15, approval of the Director of Schools Evaluation Instrument for the 2020-21 school year found on tab 6.
Any questions or concerns? Okay. Number 16, insurance update.
We discussed on about there's been several school board members talk to me about about when the insurance study committee that this board created back in the spring, when we would be looking at state health plan and just comparisons. Basically the recommendation of the board was to continue looking at that. So if the board would like to, we could set a meeting for that insurance committee, study committee, for next Monday at 4 o'clock, if that's what the board wills, to continue to look at the plan options.
Okay. Will that be something that we need to, is Mr. Reed not here? Mr. Reed's not here. We need to vote on that?
Not tonight. It would just, because it was just on, I can set that, and once again, that committee is just a standing committee.
Okay.
So if I'm just bringing that to your attention to say, if it's after getting several calls and questions about this, we could just meet Monday.
Okay.
For the committee members.
All right. Thank you. Number 17, director's update.
I'll have something on Thursday night.
Thank you. Number 18, TLN, Ms. Maxwell?
Basically, we're just still watching the
Okay.
masks, and I'm not aware of any lawsuits filed in Rutherford County, and we're also paying attention to the rescheduling of the how we fund our schools. That BEP formula is up, and it was supposed to be in November, but it's been moved to the 1st of, I think, February. So still watching those.
Very good. How about 19, federal? Do you have anything federal this evening?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Number 20, general discussion. Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned.